In the Bay Area, not all the homeless are camping in doorways, asleep on the sidewalk, or wandering the streets.
Growing numbers are actually invisible. These are homeless families who feel shame and some fear about their situation.
America crossed a line, and most people didn't notice. Today, millions of workers wake up, go to work, smile at customers, then crawl into cars because rent is impossible. This isn't about bad choices. It's about a system that quietly removed housing from the promise of work. And it's spreading faster than anyone admits. In 2026, the term working homeless no longer refers to a fringe group. It describes millions of Americans who are fully employed but lack stable housing. These are warehouse workers, nurses' aides, teachers, delivery drivers, retail managers, and tradespeople earning paychecks every week, yet sleeping in cars, vans, RVs, motels, storage units, or rotating between couches. Federal definitions lag behind reality. Most housing statistics only count people using shelters or living on the street. But the working homeless often avoid shelters because they must wake up early, keep uniforms clean, and protect tools or vehicles required for work. As a result, they disappear from official counts. By 2026, estimates show over 1 million full-time workers live without permanent housing, and millions more are one missed paycheck away. This group is growing faster than traditional homelessness because it is driven by housing costs, not unemployment. A key shift happened. Homelessness is no longer caused by job loss. It is caused by housing access failure. Workers can pay for food, gas, insurance, and phones, yet still fail to qualify for housing. The system now allows people to survive, but not to live. This marks a structural break in the social contract. For decades, employment was the line separating stability from homelessness. In 2026, that line is gone. Full-time work no longer guarantees shelter, fundamentally rewriting what employment means in America. For most of the 20th century, full-time employment meant rent was affordable. That relationship collapsed after 2020 and fully broke by 2026. The core issue is simple. Wages did not rise at the same speed as rent. Between 2019 and 2026, median rents increased 40 to 60% nationally, while median wages rose roughly 15 to 20%. In many metro areas, even $22 to $25 per hour, once considered solid middle income, is no longer enough to secure housing. At $25 per hour, a full-time worker earns about $4,333 per month before taxes. After taxes, take-home pay drops closer to $3,300. Meanwhile, average one-bedroom rent in many cities now ranges from $1,700 to $2,300, not including utilities, parking, or fees. Housing experts recommend spending no more than 30% of income on rent. That threshold is now mathematically impossible for millions of workers. Rent alone can consume 50 to 70% of take-home pay. This gap forces people into survival trade-offs: skip housing to afford transportation, healthcare, and food, all required to stay employed. The job remains, but housing becomes optional in the system's design. By 2026, employment no longer protects against homelessness. It only delays it. The promise that hard work leads to shelter has been broken by economic math. The housing system didn't fail randomly. It failed through math that no longer works. Most landlords now require tenants to earn 3 times to 4 times the monthly rent to qualify. This rule alone excludes millions of working Americans. A modest $1,800 apartment requires $5,400 per month in gross income. That equals $6,800 per year. Half of U.S. workers earn less than $50,000 annually. In higher-cost regions, $2,200 rents demand incomes over $79,000, unreachable for service workers, caregivers, and essential labor. This means workers can pay rent but cannot qualify for it. Add application fees of $50 to $100 per unit, security deposits often equal to 1 to 2 months' rent, and moving costs. To move into an $1,800 apartment, many renters need $5,000 to $7,000 upfront. Impossible for paycheck-to-paycheck households. Even dual-income households struggle. If one partner loses hours or a job, the entire application collapses. This explains why employed couples and families are now living in vehicles. The system filters people out not by ability to pay, but by rigid financial ratios disconnected from real life. Once excluded, workers turn to cars, vans, RVs, and motels, not by choice, but by math. The qualification barrier has become higher than the actual cost of housing itself. The working homeless crisis accelerated after repeated waves of layoffs between 2022 and 2026. Even when one household member remains employed, the loss of a second income is often enough to trigger housing collapse. In 2025 to 2026 alone, over 1 million layoffs occurred across tech, logistics, manufacturing, healthcare support, and retail. Many households lost 20 to 40% of income overnight. Rent, however, did not adjust. Landlords do not renegotiate rent when a household loses income. Missed payments quickly turn into eviction notices. Once evicted, renters face a double penalty: lost housing and damaged credit. This creates a new category of homelessness. Families who are still employed, still paying taxes, still insured, but displaced. These households often choose vehicle living over shelters to stay together and remain close to work and schools. Crucially, layoffs don't need to be permanent. Even short employment gaps can destroy housing stability because rents operate on zero tolerance. One missed month can end a lease. By 2026, layoffs don't just create unemployment. They create housing refugees who re-enter the workforce homeless. These workers return to full-time jobs but cannot escape vehicle living because their credit is damaged and they lack deposit money. The employment gap may last weeks, but the housing displacement lasts years. This cycle transforms temporary economic shocks into permanent housing exclusion. Living in a vehicle is no longer a temporary emergency. It has become a deliberate survival strategy for working Americans. When rent exceeds income, cars and vans become the last controllable expense. Vehicle living allows workers to eliminate rent while preserving access to employment. A car provides mobility, storage, privacy, and legal ambiguity, unlike tents or shelters. This is why car living has surged near warehouses, hospitals, distribution hubs, and service corridors. By 2026, many workers sleep in rotating parking zones to avoid tickets. They maintain gym memberships for showers, laundromats for clothes, and fast food or grocery routines to appear housed at work. However, this survival comes at a cost. Sleeping in cars reduces sleep quality, increases stress, and accelerates health decline. It also exposes workers to fines, towing, and police interaction, which can instantly erase months of savings. Cities often respond by banning overnight parking, forcing workers to move constantly. This instability increases fuel costs and reduces rest, directly threatening job performance. Car living is not chosen because it's cheap. It's chosen because housing is unreachable. In 2026, millions are working full-time jobs while sleeping in vehicles because the system offers no alternative. These workers wake before dawn, dress in parking lots, and clock in on time. Their homelessness invisible to co-workers and managers who never see where they spent the night. For years, homelessness was framed as a big city problem: Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Seattle. By 2026, that framing is obsolete. The working homeless crisis has expanded into suburbs, exurbs, and small towns, where wages are lower and housing supply is thinner. In many rural and semi-rural areas, there are fewer apartments, more single-family rentals, and limited tenant protections. When rents rise, there are no cheaper alternatives nearby. A worker priced out of housing in a small town often has nowhere else to go without quitting their job entirely. At the same time, wages in smaller markets lag far behind urban pay scales. A warehouse worker earning $18 per hour in a rural county faces rents that have jumped 30 to 50% since 2020, often driven by investors, short-term rentals, or remote workers relocating from cities. Unlike major metros, small towns usually lack shelters, safe parking programs, or social services. Living in a car becomes not just common, but invisible. Workers park behind factories, near grain silos, or along county roads, staying out of sight. This geographic spread makes the crisis harder to track and easier to ignore. There are no encampments, no media footage, just quiet displacement. By 2026, working homelessness is no longer concentrated. It is embedded everywhere employment exists, from coastal cities to Midwest factory towns to southern exurbs. Living without housing does not eliminate expenses. It restructures them in more expensive ways. Many working homeless households discover that homelessness costs more than rent, just in fragmented, unpredictable charges. Gas alone can exceed $300 to $500 per month. Add oil changes, tire wear, and accelerated maintenance from using vehicles as living spaces. Fines and citations compound the damage. Overnight parking tickets range from $50 to $150. Towing can cost $300 to $800, instantly wiping out savings. Miss one shift due to towing and income drops further. Workers also pay for survival substitutes. Gym memberships costing $20 to $50 per month for showers, laundromats costing $40 to $80 per month, storage units costing $100 to $200 per month, and prepared food due to lack of cooking access. Motels become a fallback during extreme weather, costing $70 to $120 per night, quickly surpassing rent prices, but without stability. None of these expenses build credit or housing. History. They drain income while trapping workers outside the housing system. By 2026, many working homeless people spend more than renters, yet still remain unhoused, a financial paradox created by system design. The irony is brutal. Homelessness is expensive, yet it produces no path back to housing. Many employers quietly rely on a workforce that is housing insecure. Warehousing, logistics, retail, healthcare support, food service, and delivery sectors depend on labor that cannot afford to live near the job. Housing costs are treated as a personal issue, not a workforce issue. Employers raise wages marginally, while rents surge far faster, creating a permanent affordability gap. This gap keeps workers desperate, replaceable, and compliant. Some companies unofficially tolerate car living by ignoring overnight parking near facilities. Others rotate shifts knowing employees sleep nearby. Yet very few offer housing stipends, safe parking access, or flexible scheduling that acknowledges reality. The result is a labor system that externalizes housing costs onto workers while still extracting full productivity. Workers show up on time, clean, and functional, masking the crisis behind the uniform. By 2026, this arrangement has become normalized. As long as labor continues flowing, the housing instability of workers is invisible to balance sheets. The economy functions, but only because homelessness absorbs the shock that wages do not. Corporate earnings remain strong while employees sleep in parking lots. Productivity metrics look healthy while workers sacrifice sleep and health. The system works perfectly if success is measured only by profit margins and not by whether the people generating those profits have roofs over their heads. The human cost never appears in quarterly reports. One of the most disturbing shifts by 2026 is the rise of working homeless families. Parents with jobs, children enrolled in school, and no permanent place to sleep. Families avoid shelters to stay together and protect children from instability. Instead, they live in minivans, SUVs, RVs, or extended stay motels. Kids do homework in parked cars, change clothes in restrooms, and learn to stay silent at night. School districts often don't know. Families use relatives' addresses or temporary mail solutions to keep children enrolled. Teachers may notice fatigue or behavioral changes, but never see homelessness. This invisibility delays intervention. Children experience chronic stress, sleep deprivation, and academic decline, despite having working parents. The long-term impact includes higher dropout rates, health problems, and trauma. By 2026, homelessness is no longer confined to adults on the margins. It is reshaping childhood for a growing number of working families, quietly, without headlines, and without solutions. These children grow up understanding that hard work doesn't guarantee shelter. They watch parents leave for jobs every morning and return to vehicles every night. They learn to hide their reality from friends and teachers. This generation is being taught that stability is a luxury, not a right, and that employment is no protection against displacement. The psychological toll will echo for decades. The fastest-growing homeless group in America is also the least visible. The invisible homeless are employed, clean, organized, and deliberately hidden. They avoid shelters, avoid encampments, and avoid public assistance because they fear job loss, stigma, or child services involvement. They move constantly, blend in, and survive without being counted. This invisibility creates a dangerous feedback loop. Because they are unseen, policies ignore them. Because policies ignore them, they remain unseen. Official homelessness counts underestimate the crisis by hundreds of thousands, if not millions. As a result, funding, zoning reform, and housing programs fail to match reality. By 2026, America has created a permanent class of people who work, pay taxes, and keep the economy running while sleeping in vehicles at night. They are not failing the system. The system has redesigned success to exclude housing. They punch time clocks, serve customers, stock shelves, and deliver packages, all while living out of cars. Coworkers don't know, managers don't ask. The performance review never mentions that the employee is homeless. This invisibility serves everyone except the workers themselves, who carry the weight of appearing normal while surviving in vehicles. Society benefits from their labor while ignoring their displacement. The arrangement is convenient for everyone who isn't sleeping in a parking lot. By 2026, many cities have stopped treating homelessness as a housing failure and started treating it as a public order problem. Instead of building affordable units or legal vehicle living zones, local governments are expanding parking bans, overnight restrictions, anti-camping laws, and towing policies. Dozens of cities now prohibit sleeping in vehicles between certain hours. Violations often carry fines between $50 and $250 per incident. Repeat offenses can lead to vehicle impoundment, costing $300 to over $1,000 in towing and storage fees. For working people, losing a vehicle often means losing their job. These policies do not reduce homelessness. They shuffle it geographically. Workers are forced to move nightly, burning fuel, losing sleep, and risking termination for lateness or exhaustion. Enforcement escalates stress without creating housing. Criminal records for minor violations make housing access even harder. Landlords routinely reject applicants with recent citations, regardless of income or employment. A single parking ticket can ripple into months or years of instability. By 2026, cities spend millions on enforcement, while affordable housing pipelines remain stalled. The system chooses punishment because it is cheaper in the short term, even though it deepens the crisis long term. Building housing requires budgets, land, and political will. Writing tickets requires none of those things. As rent surged, used RVs and vans became de facto emergency housing for working Americans. A $10,000 to $25,000 used vehicle offered something rent no longer did: control, predictability, and survival. RVs allow families to stay together, store belongings, cook food, and sleep safely. For many workers, they were the last affordable housing option that didn't require credit checks or deposits. By 2026, an estimated 900,000 to over 1 million Americans live in RVs full-time or part-time due to housing costs. But cities are now actively targeting them with size restrictions, street bans, registration rules, and zoning enforcement. Some municipalities restrict RV parking to a few hours. Others prohibit older vehicles entirely. These rules don't distinguish between recreational use and full-time survival. Once RVs are banned, workers are pushed into cars, or worse. The crackdown removes the final buffer between employment and street homelessness. What was once a solution is now being criminalized, with no replacement offered. The irony is stark. RVs were marketed for decades as the American dream of freedom and mobility. Now that people are using them for actual survival, cities are banning them. The vehicle that symbolized leisure and adventure has become a symbol of economic failure, and rather than address the failure, cities simply outlaw the symbol. Housing access in 2026 is controlled as much by credit algorithms as by income. One eviction, late payment, or collection can destroy eligibility, even for fully employed workers. An eviction can drop a credit score by 100 to 150 points and remain on record for 7 years. During that time, most landlords automatically reject applications, regardless of current income or references. This creates a trap. Workers who lose housing due to rising rent or layoffs may regain stable employment, but remain structurally locked out of the rental market. They can pay rent, but they cannot qualify. Meanwhile, homelessness itself damages credit further. Storage units, parking fines, medical bills, and towing fees often go unpaid and enter collections. Each mark tightens the exclusion loop. By 2026, housing is no longer based on present ability. It's based on past instability. The system punishes people for surviving economic shocks, even when they recover. This credit gatekeeping transforms temporary displacement into long-term homelessness. Once locked out, many workers remain unhoused for years despite steady income. The algorithm doesn't care that rent became unaffordable. It doesn't account for layoffs, medical emergencies, or wage stagnation. It only sees missed payments. And once the score drops, the path back to housing closes, often for years, trapping workers in a cycle they cannot escape through work alone. Living without housing directly undermines physical and mental health, and by extension, job performance. Chronic sleep deprivation is one of the most common consequences of vehicle living. Studies show sleeping in cars reduces sleep duration by 2 to 4 hours per night. Constant relocation, noise, cold, and fear of enforcement prevent deep rest. Over time, this leads to impaired concentration, slower reaction times, and higher injury risk. Health issues rise quickly. Working homeless individuals experience higher rates of hypertension, infections, gastrointestinal illness, and depression, while avoiding medical care due to cost and time constraints. Missed shifts from illness or exhaustion reduce income, triggering further instability. Employers may discipline or terminate workers who cannot maintain performance, even though the cause is systemic. By 2026, homelessness is no longer just a housing issue. It's a workforce health crisis. The economy loses productivity while blaming individuals for breakdowns it created. Workers arrive at shifts already exhausted. They push through pain because they cannot afford to miss hours. They skip medications to save money. They ignore symptoms until emergencies force hospital visits they cannot pay for. This cycle accelerates decline. Managers see absenteeism and poor performance. They don't see the parking lot where the employee couldn't sleep. The system extracts labor while denying the rest required to sustain it, then punishes workers when their bodies inevitably break down under conditions no human can endure long-term. By 2026, the scale of working homelessness makes one conclusion unavoidable. This is not an individual failure problem. It is a system failure. When millions of people with full-time jobs cannot secure housing, personal budgeting is no longer the cause. For decades, housing construction failed to keep pace with population growth. The U.S. is short an estimated 4 to 6 million affordable housing units. At the same time, investor ownership accelerated. In some metro areas, 20 to 30% of single-family homes are now owned by investors, removing supply from long-term residents. Wages followed a different trajectory. Since 2000, worker productivity increased roughly 60%, while real wages rose less than 20%. Housing costs absorbed the difference. Rent inflation outpaced wage growth in over 90% of U.S. counties by 2026. Zoning laws further restrict supply. Large portions of cities remain zoned for single-family homes only, blocking apartments, duplexes, and mixed-use housing. These rules protect property values, not workers. The result is a labor system that requires low-cost workers but refuses to house them. Homelessness becomes an economic pressure valve, absorbing instability without forcing wage or housing reform. By design, the system functions, but only because shelter has been quietly removed from the definition of economic success. If current trends continue beyond 2026, working homelessness will no longer be viewed as a temporary crisis. It will become a permanent labor condition. Younger workers entering the workforce already face a housing market that is mathematically inaccessible. Home ownership rates for adults under 35 have fallen below 40%, and renting is increasingly restricted by income and credit screens. Without intervention, a growing share of workers will spend their entire working lives without stable housing. Families will cycle between vehicles, motels, and informal arrangements. Retirement will no longer guarantee security, as fixed incomes fail to match housing costs. The distinction between employed and housed will continue to erode. Cities may normalize enforcement over solutions, creating regulated displacement rather than reform. Employers may adapt to a permanently housing-insecure workforce. What feels like emergency policy today risks becoming standard operating procedure. Historically, societies that decouple work from shelter experience declining health, productivity, and social trust. The economic cost eventually exceeds the cost of reform, but only after years of damage. By 2026, the trajectory is clear. The only unanswered question is whether housing is restored as a basic outcome of work or permanently removed from it. The decision will define what employment means for generations and determine whether work still provides dignity or merely survival. The most dangerous crises aren't loud, they're normalized. In the next video, we break down what comes next if this system doesn't change. Comment what part shocked you most and subscribe because this story isn't ending.